New York City has always had a frenetic pace, but for me, over the past few months, everything has felt like a blur. Walking through its streets now was like crossing a maze with no way out. My mother's death left an immense void, and the separation from my father was the last straw that overflowed my glass of despair. I was lost, homeless, hopeless. Every day, the fight for survival became more difficult. I used to think things could get better, but reality was a constant shadow, a presence that never left me. That morning, I woke up under the thin layer of cardboard that served as my shelter. The biting cold penetrated my skin, but I was already used to ignoring the pain. My stomach growled, reminding me that I hadn't eaten properly in days. I looked around and saw other young people like me, each dealing with their own invisible battles. How I wish I was somewhere safe, where I could feel the warmth of home. As I walked through the streets, memories of my previous life haunted me. I found myself at home, laughing with my mother, her sweet voice echoing through the kitchen as she prepared dinner. Memories of game nights, of laughter and tight hugs. But all of that now seemed so distant, like a dream that shatters when you wake up. What I had was just a cardboard box and the echo of what I once was. Night arrived, and the cold intensified. I huddled in my makeshift shelter, trying to keep warm with my own arms. The nearby square was lit up, and a group of young people were gathered, laughing and talking. I was not part of them. They were like a world apart, where pain and loneliness didn't exist. I wondered what it would be like to be a part of that again, to be able to laugh without thinking about problems, without the weight of the world on my shoulders. "Hey, you're not going to stay there forever, are you?" An excited voice interrupted my thoughts. I looked up and saw a boy with disheveled hair staring at me. He had a wide smile and contagious energy. "Come on, come with us." "No thanks," I replied, forcing a smile. The truth was that I didn't feel comfortable. The group seemed so happy, and I didn't want to be a burden. The boy looked at me for a moment, as if trying to understand my resistance, but then turned back to his friends, laughing. The night passed slowly, and I tried to sleep, but the noise of the city and the cold kept me awake. When sleep finally caught me, I didn't dream, I just sank into a deep void. The next day, I woke up to sunlight filtering through the cardboard. I knew I needed to find something to eat. My stomach growled as a constant reminder of my reality. I got up, stretched and crawled out of the box, feeling the freshness of the morning. As I walked through the streets, one thought accompanied me: what would my life be like if everything had been different? If my mother were alive? If my father hadn't left me? Questions that had no answer, but that consumed me. The day was beginning and people were rushing by, each with their own destiny, while I was just a spectator of a life that no longer belonged to me. It was then that a middle-aged man, with an enigmatic air, approached me. He had a gentle expression, but his eyes held a mystery that intrigued me. "Are you hungry?" he asked, his voice calm and soft. "A little," I replied, hesitantly. I didn't know if I could trust him, but the truth was that hunger spoke louder. "Come with me, I'll give you something to eat," he insisted, not pressing. There was something in his voice that made me consider. "My name is Samuel." "Jake," I murmured, still reluctant. "Great, Jake. Let's find something for you." As we walked, curiosity began to mix with suspicion. What did that man want from me? But at the same time, hope was slowly blossoming inside me, like a flower struggling to bloom amid concrete. Hesitation consumed me as I looked at Samuel. He was a kind man, but the offer of a house, a home, seemed too surreal to be real. "Why are you doing this?" I asked, my voice shaking with uncertainty. He smiled, a smile that seemed to carry emotional weight. "Because I believe everyone deserves a second chance, Jake. I've been through difficult times, and if someone hadn't reached out to me, I don't know where I would be right now," he replied, with a sincerity that made me hesitate less. The way he spoke, as if words were a bridge between us, convinced me to accept his invitation. "Okay," he said finally. "I'm going with you." A mix of anxiety and hope began to form in my chest. Samuel waved, satisfied, and we started walking. As we walked, he told me about his life, his struggles, and how he had managed to overcome each obstacle. I lost my job and was homeless for a while. It was a very difficult time, but I found a purpose in helping others who were in the same situation, he explained, looking forward but with a nostalgic gleam in his eyes. I learned that even in the darkest hours, there is always a light at the end of the tunnel. Did you feel alone? I asked, remembering the cold nights when I huddled in cardboard boxes, fighting the loneliness. Yes, very much. But it was this loneliness that made me realize the value of human connections, he replied, his voice full of emotion. And that's what I want to offer you, Jake. Not just a roof over your head, but a new family. The idea of a new family was strange and comforting at the same time. The sun was already starting to set, turning the sky orange and pink, as we walked towards a part of the city I didn't know. Finally, we arrived at the mansion. It was an old building, with large windows and a garden that seemed to have been forgotten by time. Wow, I murmured, looking at the grandeur of the house. It's amazing. Do you like it? Asked Samuel, with a twinkle in his eye, as if he was eager for my reaction. It's more than I could have imagined, I confessed, my heart beating faster. But why do you have such a big and empty house? Because sometimes, what seems like a blessing can become a burden, Jake. I've lost a lot of loved ones and this house has become a constant reminder of my loneliness. But now, if you want, we can fill it again. He said, with a sincerity that touched me deeply. I don't know if I deserve all this, I replied, hesitantly. Everyone deserves it, Jake. You just have to believe, Samuel insisted, and his voice was an anchor amid the storm raging inside me. Samuel showed me the rooms, and every step I took inside the house made me feel a mixture of hope and fear. The kitchen was huge, with dark wood cabinets and a long table that looked ready for large family meals. Here we can cook together. What do you think about pizza on Friday? He suggested, the excitement in his tone becoming infectious. Pizza? I'd love it. I replied, smiling for the first time in a long time. The idea of being surrounded by a table full of food and laughter seemed like a distant dream, but now it seemed possible. As we explored the house, Samuel stopped in a living room filled with books. This could be your study room. If you're willing, we can work together to get you back to school, he said, with palpable hope in his voice. Back to school? I whispered, my heart racing. The idea scared and excited me at the same time. Do you really think I can do this? Absolutely, Jake. You have a lot of potential, and I'll be here to support you, he replied, placing a hand on my shoulder. The feeling of support was something I hadn't felt in a long time. As I looked out the window, watching the sky darken, new hope began to blossom within me. Maybe this was the chance I needed so much. The idea of a new life, of a new family, was slowly solidifying in my heart. Samuel was a stranger, but his sincere gaze and genuine desire to help gave me a new perspective on what was possible. I'll try, I muttered, more to myself than to him. I am going to try. I woke up in my new bed, the sun's rays filtering through the mansion's curtains, creating a soft pattern on the wooden floor. The feeling was strange, but good. I couldn't remember the last time I had slept so well. I got up, still dazed, and went to the window. The view was magnificent, a vast, well-kept garden that stretched as far as the eye could see. I took a deep breath, absorbing the freshness of the morning. It was a new day, and despite all the uncertainties, I was determined to make the most of it. In the kitchen, I found Samuel preparing breakfast. He was focused, stirring a pot of something that smelled incredibly good. Good morning, Jake. I hope you're hungry because I made pancakes, he said, smiling. His smile had a welcoming way to it, as if telling me everything would be okay. Good morning. Yes, I am, it looks delicious, I replied, trying to contain my excitement. I sat at the table while he served the pancakes, topped with fresh fruit and a drizzle of honey. You really didn't need to do that, I said, pushing aside some of my insecurity. I can help. Jake, you're home now. Here, we all have to contribute in some way, Samuel replied, sitting in front of me. I looked at him and realized I was starting to feel comfortable in his presence. With each conversation, he seemed to become more of a father figure in my life. After breakfast, Samuel suggested that we go to the house's office, where there was a large, well-lit table. You can use this space to study. What do you think about trying to go back to school? He said, with an encouraging look. Back to school? I don't know if I can. It's been so long, my voice trailed off a little. I was afraid. The idea of meeting people again and facing my old life made me nervous. I know it sounds scary, but you are stronger than you think. And remember, you are not alone. I will be by your side, he assured me. The way he talked made me feel like maybe I could really try. The idea of having a new chance started to light a small flame of hope inside me. Okay, I'll try, he said, swallowing hard. Samuel smiled, and I could sense that he was genuinely happy with my decision. We spent the next few hours organizing the space and discussing what I would like to study. He asked me questions about my interests, and I found myself talking about history, which had always been my favorite subject. History is full of lessons, Jake. We can learn a lot from the past, commented Samuel, as he watched me carefully. As the days went by, I adapted to the mansion's routine. Samuel became a constant, comforting presence. He told stories about his life, his difficulties, and how he had overcome each of them. In one of those moments, while we were sitting on the sofa in the living room, he told me about his youth. When I was your age, I went through a lot too, he began, looking into space, as if he was reliving those memories. I lost someone very dear to me and I didn't know how to deal with the pain. It was difficult, but I learned that no matter how painful it is, we must allow ourselves to feel and eventually move on. Who did you lose? Curiosity got the best of me, and I couldn't help but ask the question. There was something in his voice that made me want to understand more about him, about what had shaped him. She was a very close friend, someone who inspired me, he said, sadness showing in his eyes. I lost her in an accident. At the time, I didn't know how to deal with it and I ended up distancing myself from many people who cared about me. He paused, and I could sense there was more to the story. Do you feel guilty about this? I asked, gaining the courage to deepen the conversation. Samuel looked at me, and for a moment, silence fell between us. Yes, a little. But I've learned to understand that life goes on, and we should do the best we can with the time we have. I reflected on his words, trying to understand the weight he carried. Samuel became not just a mentor, but someone who seemed to understand the pain I felt. It was as if, behind his kindness and generosity, there was a deep story that had not yet been revealed. And, as much as I wanted to know more, I realized that everyone has their own time to open the doors of the past. Samuel, you are an incredible person. Thank you for all of this, he said, sincerely. He smiled, and in that moment, I realized I was starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, I could find happiness again. Curiosity consumed me as I roamed the halls of the mansion. The place was huge, full of old paintings and furniture that seemed to tell stories of a glorious past. With each step, a mix of fascination and distrust took hold of me. How could a man like Samuel, who seemed so generous, have lived in such an imposing place, while I was struggling to survive on the streets? The answers were hidden in every corner of that place. In one of the rooms, a framed portrait caught my eye. The woman in the photo had long brown hair and a smile that radiated warmth. I was paralyzed. She was the living image of my mother. The same smile, the same features. My heart raced. How could Samuel have a photo of my mother? What did this mean? Jake? Samuel's voice brought me back to reality. He was at the door, watching me with an expression that mixed concern and curiosity. Are you well? I found this. My finger was shaking as I pointed to the portrait. Who is she? Why do you have a picture of her? The question came out as a whisper, but the tension in the air was palpable. Samuel hesitated, his gaze dropping to the floor. She was a very special friend, he replied, his voice thick with emotion. An important part of my life. A friend? It seems more than that. I couldn't contain my indignation. You never mentioned that you knew my mother. You are hiding something from me. He took a deep breath, as if weighing his words. Jake, there are things in our past that are complicated. I didn't want you to feel pressured or confused. Confused? I'm more than confused. I didn't know you and her were so close. Why didn't you ever tell me? I deserve to know the truth. Anger rose in my chest, and I let it show in my voice. I know you deserve it, but not everything is simple, Samuel replied, his expression now a mix of sadness and frustration. Life puts us on paths that we sometimes don't understand. I just wanted to help you, Jake. I didn't want to hurt you. Help me? Or were you just trying to make amends for something? What else are you hiding? I was in emotional turmoil. He had helped me, that was true, but the feeling of betrayal settled in my heart. I understand your frustration. The truth is that I walked away from your mother when she needed me most. I didn't know how to deal with the pain of losing her, Samuel said, his voice breaking. And when you were alone, I couldn't remain indifferent. I wanted to do something good. But you can't just pose as a savior without telling me who you really are. I replied, feeling the anguish growing inside me. I need to know the truth. He approached, with a deep and sincere look. Jake, I'm just a man who got lost in his own choices. Helping you was a way of seeking redemption that I never thought I could achieve. But the truth about the past is painful, and I don't want you to hurt anymore. His words echoed in my mind, but I didn't know if I could trust them. The idea that Samuel had a past so intertwined with mine was confusing and frightening. So, did you know that one day I might find out? Have you been waiting for this moment? Samuel closed his eyes for a moment, as if bracing himself for a storm. I never wanted you to find out like this. I wanted you to trust me first, so we could build something together, without shadows of the past. Build something? How can I do that if I don't know who you really are? I said, frustration boiling over. You are a stranger who has infiltrated my life and now everything seems like a big lie. He walked away, seeming to absorb my words. The silence that followed was heavy, and the atmosphere between us was charged with tension. What was supposed to be a refuge now became an emotional battleground. I didn't know what to do, but one thing was certain, the path ahead was fraught with uncertainty, and the truth I sought could change everything. The relationship between Samuel and I began to cool. I felt like I was living in a house full of secrets, where every wall whispered stories I didn't know. The long conversations that once filled our evenings have now become rare. I looked at Samuel and saw a man who seemed distant, almost as if he was watching me from a fogged-up window. What was once a bond of trust had now turned into a tangle of distrust and confusion. That afternoon, I decided I needed answers. The image of the woman in the photo haunted me, and I couldn't continue living under the same roof as Samuel without understanding the connection between him and my mother. The idea of looking for a family friend came like a light at the end of a dark tunnel. A friend of my mother's, someone who could tell me more about their past. Jake, where are you going? Samuel asked when he saw me leaving the house. His eyes held a mix of concern and curiosity. I'm going for a walk, I replied, trying to hide the truth. I didn't want him to know I was looking for information. The truth was, I needed an answer he wasn't willing to give me. When I arrived at the little coffee shop where we used to meet, the smell of fresh coffee and baked bread felt like a balm to my weary soul. The place was almost empty, except for a few people sitting at isolated tables and the barista cleaning the counter. I ordered an espresso and waited. Jake, my boy. The voice of Leo, a longtime friend of my mother's, echoed through the cafeteria. He was a sturdy man with gray hair and a warm smile that reminded me of happier days. What brings you here? Hi, Leo, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. I needed to talk about my mom. He sat across from me, his expression changing from cheerful to serious. Sure, what's going on? It's about Samuel, I began, hesitantly. He knows my mother. But I don't know how much he told me about her. Can you tell me something? Leo looked at me, his sharp gaze assessing the situation. Samuel? He was very close to your mother, Jake. They had a strong connection, more than you can imagine. He was there at important moments in her life. But why didn't he ever say anything? Why didn't he tell me he was her friend? My voice was shaking with frustration. Sometimes people carry their burdens alone. When his mother passed away, Samuel was devastated. He felt guilty for not being there, for not doing more for her. Maybe he thinks that by walking away you were safer, Leo explained, with a sad look. His words were like a dagger, penetrating my already wounded heart. The idea that Samuel, the man who was trying to help me, could have been such a close friend of my mother's changed everything. I felt confused and emotional, like I was in a whirlwind. He helped me when I needed it most. But now, I feel like I don't know the truth about him, I said, frustration boiling over. Sometimes, Jake, what seems like a betrayal is actually an act of protection, Leo commented. Talk to him. Ask about the past. He may be waiting for the right moment to open his heart. Those words echoed in my mind as I walked back home. The thought of confronting Samuel made me nervous, but I knew I needed to do it. After all, the only way to rebuild our relationship was through the truth, no matter how painful it was. When I arrived at the mansion, the sun was starting to set, turning the sky orange and purple. I took a deep breath and entered. Samuel was in the living room, sitting in an armchair, looking out the window. Hi, Jake, he said, not looking away. How was your day? Samuel, I began, my voice hesitant. We need to talk. He turned his head, and I saw a shadow of concern on his face. About you and my mother. The atmosphere in the mansion was heavy, almost palpable, as I looked at Samuel. My heart was beating like it was about to explode. The truth was on the tip of my tongue, and I needed to hear it. Why did you help me, Samuel? What is the real reason behind all this kindness? My voice was firmer than I expected, but the pain and confusion were undeniable. Samuel took a deep breath, his gaze lost in the distance. He looked like a man older than he really was, carrying an invisible weight. Jake, I always wanted to tell you. I have always cared about you, even before you were born. He hesitated, emotion showing in his eyes. I was your mother's boyfriend, a close friend of hers. After she passed away, I moved away. The guilt consumed me. His words hit me like a strong wave, leaving me breathless. Were you her boyfriend? I could hardly believe it. The image of Samuel and my mother together, laughing and happy, began to form in my mind. Why weren't you there? Why didn't you help when I needed it most? I didn't know how. The pain of loss was overwhelming. I felt so helpless, and in some ways, I believed you would be better off without me around. But the truth is, I've always thought about you, Jake. I always worried. Samuel looked deep into my eyes, his sincerity was palpable. Helping you now is my way of trying to make up for my mistakes. A whirlwind of emotions invaded me. The anger, the sadness, the confusion, everything was mixed together in a tangle that left me dizzy. Do you think this is enough? That a house and a few conversations can erase the pain I felt? I lost my mother. I had no one. The frustration boiled over, and I felt hot tears streaming down my face. I know, Jake. I know nothing can fix what happened. But I want you to know that you are not alone. I have always been here, even if in thought. And now, if you allow me, I want to help build a better future for you. You deserve this. Samuel's sincerity was like a ray of light in the midst of the darkness I had carried for so long. The tension in the air began to dissipate. Understanding Samuel's pain gave me a new perspective. I don't know if I can forgive you right away. But maybe I can try to understand." My voice was softer, and as I looked at him, I realized there was a fragility there, a vulnerability that I had never noticed before. "That's all I ask, Jake. One step at a time. Life is made of new beginnings, and I would like to be part of yours." He smiled, a shy smile, but one that lit up his face. "We can build a home together where you feel loved and safe." The weight I was carrying began to shift into something lighter. Maybe I can try. I can't promise it will be easy, but I'm willing to give it a chance." The reconciliation between us was like a new beginning. At that moment, I realized that despite the scars of the past, there was light in the future. Together, we could create a home that symbolized not just pain, but also hope and renewal. Samuel was not just a stranger, he was a part of me I didn't yet know. With a nod, Samuel approached, and we hugged. The human warmth and connection we felt in that moment were undeniable. It was as if the shadows of the past were dissipating, giving way to something more beautiful, a bond that could unite us in unexpected ways. From that day on, we decided to not only rebuild our lives but also support each other. The story of our lives intertwined in ways I could never have imagined. And so, with new hope in my heart, I began to believe that it was possible to find light even in the darkest situations.